Hello, welcome to episode 192 of the Book Binge, where I'm doing something a little unconventional and that I wasn't sure if I was going to make a video about it or not. I'm going to be covering a couple books by Cormac McCarthy again because I reread them and have some slightly new opinions to give about them. These are for The Road, the first McCarthy book that I ever read, and one that I didn't really like the first time around. And then No Country for Old Men, it was the second McCarthy book that I read, the one that ultimately ended up making me read all of his books and which I did like the first time around. The reason I want to do these videos is because it turns out I caused up, or stirred up rather, a little bit of a stink about a year ago, the first time that I read and reviewed The Road. It definitely got me a few dislikes. We will say that review was not, it wasn't accepted as well as most of my reviews typically are. And many of my other McCarthy related videos in the time since then, at least for the first few months, were some of the only videos that I ever got any dislikes on. And I'm pretty sure almost all of it was because I had a negative reception to The Road. So people would, or at least a person or two would just see, oh, he read another McCarthy book or something, or he is reading another McCarthy book and he disliked The Road, dislike the video. It's actually pretty funny. It got to be really consistent where only the videos that ever mentioned McCarthy were the ones that lost subscribers or got dislikes, even if I was liking the book. So I definitely caused or stirred up some stuff when I disliked The Road the first time around. If I could speak English, that would definitely help a little bit. Even though I reviewed No Country for Old Men rather positively afterwards. But anyway, I did reread both of these books pretty recently around the time that my full McCarthy reading journey was coming to a close. I reread The Road right before I read Blood Meridian as the last first time McCarthy read for me, and then I reread No Country for Old Men afterwards to kind of wrap it up and be like my final impression of McCarthy. And I wanted to give a video to update some of my thoughts on both of these because I felt like it was worth doing, especially where The Road was concerned, and hope that maybe a person or two who watched the first review and saw how much I disliked the book that time around see that I did largely change my mind on it, or at least to a small degree. To a notable degree, I should say. That's probably the most appropriate term. But yeah, these are the first two McCarthy books that I read, and I'm taking the chance now to talk about them again. One of them to give the book that I disliked a second chance, and one of them to give the one I liked a secondary final word. So let's go ahead and jump into it. I'm not going to be mad in this video, I promise you that. Because I definitely had a good time with these rereads, I'll say. So let's start off with The Road and actually kind of get that one out of the way. I somewhat infamously, to some degree, highly disliked this book the first time that I read it. I open to admitting that fact because it was true. I really did not like The Road the first time around. Doing No Country for Old Men as an immersive read after that meant that I wanted to retry The Road, however, because I did read this eyeball only the first time, and some of McCarthy's, prose writing habits, as we'll say, if you've ever read McCarthy, you know what I'm talking about, didn't sit with me very well the first time around. So when the immersive reading thing for No Country for Old Men worked out, and having read basically all of McCarthy's other books immersively in the time since then, either audio only or immersively to some degree, depending on the book, I knew that I wanted to reread The Road and give it another chance with the immersive reading format, so that I would know that I at least gave it a second chance, that I gave it another shot, that I gave it an honest try in a format that I knew worked a little bit better for McCarthy for me. So it was mostly just to give it that second chance, like I said, give it a fair shake with the same method that I read the rest of them in, for consistency, we'll say. I did so near the end of my McCarthy journey. Like I said, Blood Meridian was the only book that I hadn't read yet by the time I reread The Road. And yeah, the reread definitely went a little bit better. I can say that the dialogue was not nearly as grating as it was the first time. I thought it was largely flat and didn't really work for me, eyeball reading. Audio-wise, with the narration to kind of aid with the dialogue, definitely made it work a lot better overall. The prose itself wasn't as irritating because McCarthy's storytelling style is more for storytelling than for writing, in my personal opinion, so audio definitely works better on that front. The characters were definitely a lot less lifeless this time around, and largely this was because the dialogue wasn't so piss poor. It didn't seem quite so bad with the audio narration to kind of aid things along. And the plot also didn't seem quite as strideless. It didn't seem like it had nearly as much nothing going on this time around. It felt like the drive of it was a little bit more there this time as a reread, and maybe that's because I knew the plot going into it, so I wasn't as reserved on that front this time around. I don't quite know for sure, but I was a little bit more into it overall. I can't say I loved The Road even after the reread, but I definitely don't hate it, and that's really the important note, where The Road was like barely not a 1-star read the first time. I gave it 2 stars, and that's because of the couple of scenes that I did find to be pretty good. The scenes that I did enjoy from it were good enough that I was willing to be like, okay, I'm gonna give this 2 stars at least. So it was basically 1.5 rounded up to 2. I believe if you check my Goodreads, I still have The Road at 2 stars even after the reread, but the shift in my thoughts on that are a little bit more substantial. I would say my feelings went more closely up to like a 2.5 star that I kept rounded down to 2. So it looks the same on Goodreads, but like I said, I can't necessarily say I loved this. In fact, in some ways, it's hard to say that I actively really liked The Road this time around, but I do not hate it anymore. I don't have a resentment for The Road anymore, and the reread was a big part of that. So I definitely think that doing the reread was worth it. I'm very glad that I gave it that honest try. There were those things, like I said, that I liked more about it this time around, so it was definitely a worthy effort on my part, at least in my opinion. But let's move on now to talking a little bit about my reread of No Country for Old Men. Like I said, the one that I liked and the one that ultimately made me go on and read McCarthy's whole novel bibliography. How did this reread go? Honestly, I can't say that it necessarily went any better, but it also definitely did not go any worse. The experience was equally as good the second time around as it was the first time. The hard-hitting moments still hit pretty hard, which I was a little surprised by. I wasn't sure how hard some of those moments would hit, now knowing sort of those reveals. Sugar as the main villain was still just as terrifying as he was the first time around, which I was glad for. Some of the more confusing parts, or the parts that I didn't follow quite as clearly the first time around, weren't confusing, and I was fully able to follow this time around because I largely knew what else was happening around it. Yeah, so I enjoyed even the stuff that I was a little bit less certain about the first time around. It was also great following along to some of the deeper material of the book as well this time, with better of an idea how it contextually fits within the story. Some of the stuff like Sheriff Bell's musings, the stuff that happens at the beginning of each chapter, some of the more subtextual material of the book as well largely fit a little bit better for me this time around. The reread for this one, even though I say it didn't necessarily go a lot better, it did, however, push me to up my rating of it from 4 stars up to 5, because it should have been that from the very beginning, quite frankly. There's no reason why it shouldn't have been 5 stars the first time. I was mostly just being stubborn, being like, yeah, but I don't really like his prose writing style, and like there are a couple moments that I didn't think were as good as like the really hard-hitting moments. So I was like really like grasping at straws to give it 4 stars instead of 5 when it absolutely deserved 5 stars. I believe it was my 4th favorite book of last year when I did my top 10 books of 2023. I put it at number 4. So it definitely should have deserved that 5 stars, and I think it did. So doing the reread justified my decision on that, so I finally made it 5 stars. So it's not my only 5-star McCarthy read, but it should have been my first one, even though it technically wasn't. So that's how I felt about that on the reread. For an updated recommendation on both of these books, I still can't necessarily say that I personally actively recommend The Road, because I still have certain problems with it. I don't think it's a fantastic book, but I think that enough people love The Road overall that I think it's definitely fine to try. I'm not going to disagree with people giving it a shot. I don't think it's necessarily the best place to start with McCarthy, even though I know a lot of people do. And a lot of that's because it's where I started, and I didn't love it quite so much. I would actually say that it's generally a good book. I'm definitely not with the majority on it, so continue to take my opinion with a grain of salt on that one. I still, however, 100% recommend reading No Country for Old Men, of course, and I actually think this is the best starting place for him. If you're interested in reading McCarthy, there's a good chance that the kind of stuff that you like is going to fit a little bit more in line with what this book contains, just conceptually. And the movie for it, I hear, is really, really great. It's one that I should actually make time to watch now, since I've read the book twice at this point. So if this is one that you've definitely experienced as a movie and you liked it that way, or if you're interested in trying McCarthy but don't know where to start, I think this is the best place to start. I don't necessarily agree or disagree that The Road is a great book. It wasn't for me personally overall, but I know a lot of other people really love it. So kind of make your decision based off of the things you're personally interested in. But yeah, that is basically the video. But I will say, coming up on, oh man, how do dates even work on this? Let me double check so that I know what I'm telling you and make sure that it's actually correct. Yeah, this video is coming out on a Thursday, it looks like. So it's actually this Sunday. So in just a few days, I will be doing a ranking tier list video that is going to be covering all 12 of McCarthy's novels. Now that I have read all 12 of them in the same format, in this audio immersive way, my initial reviews of all 12 novels are out at this point, so I'm going to be doing that ranking to kind of give you a chance to look at where I would place all the McCarthy books in context of one another. I'm excited for that video to come out on Sunday, and it also means that my journey with McCarthy is going to be done here very soon now. Like I said, Sunday, 3 days from now. Definitely check back on the channel then for a ranking video on McCarthy's entire bibliography. I'll talk about every one of his 12 books in there. I'll do that tier list, the implicit ranking that tier lists kind of have of all the 12 novels. I'll have more than a few hot takes in that video because of, you know, some of my hot takes associated with McCarthy as a whole, but I'm excited for that video. I'm excited that at the time of recording this video, it's been right about a year. It's been very nearly a year, and at this video's release, it's been a little over a year since I started reading McCarthy as a whole, an author who I didn't think I would ever actually read, and after reading The Road for the first time, I didn't think I would read another one of his books again, but now that I've read all 12 and have a ranking out, it's kind of surreal. It's kind of a weird feeling, but I'm excited for that video to come out, and I hope you are too. Like I said, that'll be coming out on Sunday, so check back then. I hope to see you there.